Guys, everybody please switch on your cameras so that we can begin with the policy Manthan discussion. Others? All right, we will begin with the policy Manthan discussion now. Good evening, everybody, for joining in. So, before starting, I would request all of you to please write down your topics in the chat box so that we can begin with our policy Manthan discussion. All right, so I guess we'll begin with the policy Manthan discussion now. So as you all know, the topic for today's policy Manthan discussion is going to be around the lack of fundings in the government schools specifically. So we would begin the policy Manthan discussion by hearing Sri Lakshmi. Sri Lakshmi is going to talk about overview of the infrastructural spending in specific case of Kerala. So yes, Sri Lakshmi.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm having a cold. So if at any point I'm not audible, please let me know.
Sure.
So giving an overview of the infrastructural spending in public schools, right? We know that India at all levels and obviously like state-wise also faces this common problem of infrastructural lack of facilities in public schools. We've talked on length about it at Sarkari school time and again on the perception of a Sarkari school or the perception of a public school is like bad infrastructure, not too great of a teaching staff, and like more than that, the quality of education is often now this is a perception that runs through India, and obviously every state has a different educational model. I'll be extending on Kerala's educational model and trying to contrast it with the new changes that have come up with the union's scheme on public education. But more than that, this year we saw that the budget is supposedly set to be the largest allocation for education so far in the education sector, with more than 68,000 crores being spent on education. A common pattern of issue with infrastructural spending that is observed through years through budget is just that while the allocations go beyond like 6.43 lakhs, pertaining over a period of the budget year, and like while it keeps on increasing year to year, now this year government claims that it has spent the most in education. The major pattern that comes up in states is just that while the infrastructure is spended on like giving uh, salaries to staff and other faculty members, and like a larger chunk of the percentage goes to salaries more than the infrastructural development or like like so to say structures in schools, right? So infrastructure not only entails buildings or other facilities, it also entails the quality of education. That is, nowadays we talk about digital classrooms. The government is making efforts to bring in digital classrooms at school level in a lot of public schools, but again the largest more than 70% of the funding goes into salaries. Now this is like a common problem that's occurring, that's a pattern across all states in India. Like certain states spend more on infrastructure, but most of the states spend spend more on like teaching staff and other faculties. Now, the case of Kerala, why I brought it up is just that 10, I think this has been not a recent change, but it has been happening for a decade now. Kerala is known for its good education sector, and a recent change that we see is also like a lot of like private individuals funding in public education. Not very recently. Few years back, there was this case of like public schools being funded by people who have been residing outside India, right? So the Kerala government's initiative to collaborate with such people have been seen across the state. More than that, uh, during 2016 or 2017, Kerala government did a lot of spending on creating digital classrooms, which is something even I have experienced as a student during my timeline in my school, where digital classrooms and a lot of facilities for digitalization of education was created. A same sort of a change is now being adopted by the central government also to bring into a lot of public schools, and these schemes are coming up. I think Archana will be talking about PM Shri, but I'll talk about the whole like the education amalgam scheme, right? It's also trying to incorporate the digitization and bringing in accessibility to educational better infrastructure in public schools throughout India. But again, the evaluation of the scheme also need to be done on more than funds being allocated. Is the fund actually reaching the schools properly something, yeah, again, which can be done through evaluation.
All right. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for talking about infrastructure with respect to Kerala. So now moving forward, we will hear it from Manaswini. Yeah, Manaswini wants to share her thoughts on infrastructure and funding on schools in India. So yes, Manaswini, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Coming to our topic on infrastructure and funding on government schools in India, we always looked in government school to be, to be a place where facilities are not available, like washrooms are not available, digital classrooms were not available. Yeah, government schools are also very scrutinized by the kind of infrastructure and the quality of education it holds. But recently, we have seen few amazing models, as one of my friends talked about Kerala's model. We could also look at Delhi's government's model and initiatives of a few governments like Rajasthan, which enabled a program wherein they recruit teachers and train them for their quality of education. Now, every year during the budget season, every year we allocate, there is an increase in allocation for the education in GDP. But experts still say that to reach the standards of the global, in this globalized world, there we need to still increase the we need to still increase the funding to improve the quality of education and infrastructure. And in India, we also face a problem of corruption. It is not only funding that is the only problem. Corruption is also still relevant in our society. And uh, yeah, I think this is what I want to talk for today. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you so much, Manaswini, for sharing your thoughts with respect to infrastructure. So moving forward, we will hear it from Aman. He's going to be talking about the Shanti school infrastructure that we have and the reasons and way forward. So yes, Aman, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. So as everyone was talking about the infrastructural issues that government schools have been facing, so there's no doubt that government schools are in dilapidated condition, that their infrastructure is crumbling. They lack even the most basic amenities, be it washroom, playgrounds, medical rooms, libraries, and so on. But they also portray an ableist infrastructure that which doesn't cater to the needs of CWS and students, children with special needs students. So it severely affects their learning outcomes, and which promotes absenteeism and affects their overall development. And directly affecting the overall enrollment ratio. So this is a classic example of broken window syndrome. Now, there are multiple reasons, funding being one of the major reasons behind why the school infrastructure are in such a situation, but there are other problems, reasons as well. So one of the first one being, again, it's the lack of budgetary allocations and budgetary mismanagement compared to the developed nation. Obviously, we have seen a consistent and substantial increase in budgetary allocation, but if we look at against the percentage of India's GDP, then it remains fairly low. So India has always been a country which has focused on social production, social protection schemes rather than public goods. It doesn't focus on public goods. That just it's political behavior because people demand social protection over long-term investment on public goods. Now that is one of the biggest reasons why infrastructure is not focused upon, and social protection is given priority. So the second biggest reason is the notions and the preconceived notions and the image that the government schools are usually associated with. So they are seen as inadequate for upper class and upper class people because of their obvious dilapidated condition. But this results in a cyclical behavior. So when there is not a substantially good infrastructure there, that the state and the private sector doesn't invest in it, and when it doesn't invest in it, it remains in that cyclic process. So it never improves. Now the third biggest reason is that question of who access government schools. So most of them are people who can't afford better education. So this is the basic quality of education that they could possibly receive. Now that ultimately results in that the stakeholders in these schools are politically not that powerful, right? They're not politically that conscious. So state undermines their interest, and now eventually the infrastructure is again takes a hit because of their political unconsciousness. Now, the fourth and final biggest reason is that the privatization of education system. Now, we've talked about it in length before, that the coaching culture and so on and so forth, and how how it's taking away the focus of Indian polity over government schools to private schools and private education institutions. So now, if we talk about what needs to be done, so the first thing that needs to be done is the outlook that the state and the civil society has towards public goods, toward state infrastructure, towards the government schools. So we need to have an outlook that focuses on public goods instead of social protection. Now, the second thing that needs to focus on is that we need to talk about the conception, the image, that which is something Delhi government has done an amazing job with regards to. So they have focused more on the image that the Delhi government schools can also provide excellent quality of education with their introduction of schools of excellence. So when that image is changed, people invest in it more, people care about it more, and the infrastructure is definitely then eventually is focused upon more. So the third thing that needs to be done is, and most importantly, is that the budgetary allocation again. So what we've seen recently, it's a substantial increase, but the proportion to it, the percentage of education budget to the total amount of GDP remains fairly low, that which needs to be increased and needs to be in par with other developed nations. Now, finally, we need to focus on the Right to Education Act, so and its proper implementation, because it lays down the standards of education and educational environment that is essential and that every child deserves. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aman, for highlighting the bad infrastructure part and also bringing forth the reasons and way forward as to what can be done. So moving forward, yes, so moving forward, we will hear it from Rutuja. Rutuja is going to talk about how improving infrastructure is improving education. So yes, Rutuja, please go ahead.
Yes. So usually we hear that those who love to read, write, and study can do it anywhere. They argue that space does not matter. Physical context is just secondary, but knowledge is what is important. But when we practically look into it, having classrooms, learning spaces in good condition is essential for students to achieve their expected academic results. The fact that school infrastructure comfortable space, ventilation, lighting, water, electricity, internet facilities tend to improve the attendance and also the interest of the students to come to school. Not only that, but availabilities of library, science lab, a computer lab plays a important role in their academics. However, in India, various reports suggest that about 2 lakh of school do not have library facilities. 9 lakh do not have functioning computer lab, and like about 11 lakh don't have internet facilities. While most of the government school has have functioning toilet facilities, then they don't have the sanitation or water, hand wash or water facilities. And there is no disabled friendly infrastructure in like any of the government schools of India. Also, the study shows that how negative perception of school social climate contributes to the high absence amongst the student. About 70% of the poor academic performance is seen among the students. But on the other hand, an attempt has been made by government of Rajasthan to improve this. The role of complete school building was conducted, where the teachers reported that there's a visible improvement in the attendance ratio, and also the school witnessed major migration from the private school in that region. The other issue is school running in double shift due to the lack of infrastructure. Uh, Unable to accommodate the increasing strength of the students in the classroom, various schools have to function in 2 shifts, so leading to various problems to various students. Uh, so this upgradation was mainly during the COVID times, where major chunk of students from private sector came into the government school. But despite this upgradation, no facilities or measures was provided to improve it. The other is issue faced by the disabled students due to this lack of infrastructure. Disabled students don't have access to the mainstream school, and like only 1.2 of them, two of the students are enrolled in the school. Although we have various initiative like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which is essential, school buildings and related infrastructure play a very important role in improving the quality of education and for motivating students to at least attend the classes. And to end this in a positive note, the initiative like Transform Life One School at a Time has helped to actually correct the image of various government schools in various states of India.
Thank you, Rituja. Now, moving forward, we will hear it from Ojasvi. Ojasvi is going to be talking about government school infrastructure, some data points, and also she's going to be talking about funding and other problems with reference to Jammu and Kashmir specifically. So, yes, Ojasvi, please go ahead.
Good evening. I'll be first highlighting about some data regarding infrastructure in government schools of Jammu and Kashmir. First of all, there are around 23,173 government schools in JNK, and JNK ranks poorly amongst the other states. It is poor infrastructure, and it is amongst those 7 states which have poor infrastructure. Around 17,106 of the 23,000 schools, they have electricity connection, and only 79.4% schools they have girls toilet in Jammu and Kashmir. And out of the 23,173 schools, only 20,791 schools have school libraries or book reading corners. And most of the schools, they do not provide regular health checkups to students. Around 40% schools only provide health checkups to the students, and 23% schools just they have the computer facility. So most of the students, they do not know how to use computers, and they also face problems during entrance tests that solely focus on that are computer based. And just 22% schools, they have internet facilities. And if we look at the data for the infrastructure for children with special needs, then there are just 2% schools that have facilities for them. And even when we look in the terms of co-curricular aspects, some special rooms for them, just 5% schools have such facilities for the students, and only 51% schools have integrated science lab facilities for the students. So we can see how poorly the schools have been performing. If most of the schools they lack in terms of library facilities and the lab facilities. So you can see that how can we can see the holistic development of students because they're solely focusing on academic aspects. And even in terms of academic aspects, most of the students who are studying in government schools, they have to avail the facilities for private tuition teachers because most of the teachers they remain absent in the schools. Now I'll be focusing on the problems that are there apart from infrastructure. So there's a very weird case of pupil teacher ratio in Jammu and Kashmir. It's actually lopsided because the teachers are more, but the students are lesser here. So there are 10,000 plus teachers when we talk about the schools of Jammu and Kashmir, and most of the teachers they are not willing to work in the schools which are situated in rural areas. So there are surplus teachers when we talk about cities and town areas, but most of the teachers they are not willing to get posted in schools in rural areas. But Otherwise, the overall the pupil teacher ratio is 1 is to 15 in primary schools and 1 is to 12 when we look at the secondary level. So it is very low. And so due to this low pupil teacher ratio, most of the teachers they ask the students to study on their own. And even during the JNK board secondary examinations, there are so many cases like even this year there are the cases where the teachers they themselves ask students to cheat. And earlier JNK had the system that for the 8th class, 8th grade, 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th, so all these classes they had boards, but most of the times the teachers they are telling their students to cheat because so that they can avail good marks and pass with flying colors. But when we talk about entrances or other competitive exams, then these students they face a severe crisis there. And The main problem is because most of the people who are involved in the administration, like the zonal education officers, even they are also involved in these corrupt practices. So data they provide to government is very much manipulated, and even when so there is lot many corrupt practices that are taking place. But and most of the students and their parents they also do not get involved, and there's lack of parent teacher meetings that have been taking place in government schools in comparison to the private schools. And when we look at consider the national average, they score poorly in arithmetic and language, even below the national average, though we know according to the acer data that even national average has been declining rapidly, and after the COVID, there has been a serious decline in the literacy levels regarding the arithmetic in the students all over India. Now, there have been certain budgetary allocations related to infrastructure this year. That this time the highest allocation has been made for the education sector in JNK, and the government has promised to establish 500 kindergartens and 518 smart rooms or visual classrooms for higher secondary schools. And they've also promised to establish 200 vocational laboratories, and 40 schools will be provided with vocational labs. But how many? But there's a serious gap that how many of these approved budgets would actually be allocated, and how many of these promises would be fulfilled. And we can see maybe after new education policies, maybe more improvements will be made. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajasvi, for highlighting the specific case of Jammu and Kashmir. Like there were so many interesting points to hear from your speech about Jammu and Kashmir. So now moving forward, we will hear it from Archana. Archana is going to specifically be talking about PM Shri scheme. So yes, Archana.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So, as like all others have talked about the overview and like what we lack and how we can improve, but I want to focus on a particular scheme, which is PM Shri scheme that can be abbreviated as Pradhan Mantri's School Rising in India, Schools Rising in India. So it is basically a scheme for adding technology and innovation to the infrastructure of government schools under the NEP 2020. So it covers around more than 14,500 schools, and till the time 27,360 crore rupees have been like allotted to it. But now, like moving forward, I just want to focus on 4 points which it wants to accommodate. So the first thing it takes into account is the quality and innovation enhancement programs, which is like holistic program card and innovative pedagogies and bagless days. So, and it also promotes internship with local artisans, so that there can be a link between the local people as well as like between the government institutions. So we generally see that whenever we talk about rural areas, the people from urban areas barely know about what the things they are consuming come from, like what is the origin of them, or how they are being made. So it is just to enhance their knowledge. And the second is beneficiary oriented entitlement, under which under RT they are taking into account, and in that they will be giving science and math kits to people, and ICT classrooms, digital libraries for using digital pedagogy, and and the other is they have included a point that is strengthening of infrastructure, which is basically covering all other points. And the last one is saturation approach, which means like they are including the modern facilities, science labs, and vocational labs all together. And through this, like they want to strengthen the infrastructure. That's all.
Thank you, Archana, for walking us through the PM Shri scheme. And now moving forward, we will hear it from Sakshi. Sakshi is going to be talking about lack of funding and its solution.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'll be talking about the lack of funding for education infrastructures in government schools. So India is a nation that has always been riddled with the education problems, infrastructure problems also. So there are a lot of reasons why India is lacking behind. So government schools that are set up in village and small towns don't provide quality education, neither proper infrastructure. The main reason behind this is the lack of funding they receive from government. Even when they receive funding, it's not properly utilized. Teachers working in government schools do not receive their salaries on time. This makes them disappointed and unmotivated to teach. So there's a lack of education quality, and so there is an infrastructure problem. So there are non-government schools in India that provide quality education but are too expensive for the poor. State government lack the funds to hire permanent teachers. Children in government schools remains obvious to a lot of things going around in the country because the education is not up to the mark, and plus the infrastructure regarding the schools is not up to the mark, like public toilets for girls or any other infrastructure that's lagging behind. Some even drop out of the school to support their family. So one of the reasons is like the education is not being properly utilized. Little to no money spent on teacher training programs, which would help improve learning significantly. There aren't enough resource to train the teachers. Thus, teachers shouldn't be put to blame for low quality of education. So even though education is underfunded, states are not able to fully utilize their funds. One of the main reason is a delay payment by teachers, by states to teachers, and hereby it's not properly utilized. And you can see that the government schools infrastructure is not properly made up because the funds are not properly utilized in infrastructure also. So one of the main reasons behind this is payment to states by central government. A major problem for government school is adapting to digital learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what happened here is like the problem they have to deal with is like you don't have computers or any other facilities to teach children's, as because there is no fund. We need stricter rules to increase education funding from the governments. Talking about the solutions for that is like improvement in health insurance, support for children from difficult family conditions, improve the quality of teachers, close the teacher gaps, improve access to education for girls and women, better education infrastructure, and proper survey for for seeing that the funding is utilized properly, made, and the infrastructure is made properly, and better education infrastructure, financial support for families, so that the students would come and visit the schools and raise awareness about importance of educations. And then the students living in rural area, they would come to visit school and learn about education, and increase in quality regarding social security. These are the solutions which have to be tackled. And so if these solutions are being placed, then the quality education would increase, and somehow proper survey would help that they would a survey would help to see that the funding is being utilized and it is used for infrastructure use only. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sakshi, for highlighting and bringing out some of the pragmatic solutions that can be put forth to improve the entire infrastructure situation. Now, moving forward, we will hear it from Nikita. Nikita is going to be talking about need for better infrastructure at government schools. So yes, Nikita, please go ahead.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So I will talk about why there is a need for good infrastructure in government school. So schools are supposed to be the temples of learning, but the educational institution in India are in bad condition due to poor infrastructure. Lack of access to electricity, toilets, and with too few teachers, Indian schools suffer. There is a lot of work needed in school level infrastructure. So the areas where India lack in poor infrastructure are: first is electricity. The district information system for education data shows that only 6 out of every 10 schools in the country have access to electricity. State level data throws up an even grimmer picture. One third of states do not provide electricity to the majority of their schools. Second area is sanitation. Access to sanitation facilities poses a major impediment to student attendance, especially girls, and leads to dropouts. The annual status of education reports to 2017 data found that only 68% toilets in government schools are usable, despite the fillip provided by the Swachh Bharat Swachh Vidyan campaign. The usability of these structures remain questionable. Third is the availability of teachers. The number of teachers admitted to school has risen and the percentage of vacant posts has been decreasing, but the competence of the teaching staffs are below par according to DISC data. 18% teachers in India had no professional qualification in teaching. Digital infrastructure. Only 18% government school have a computer and 4% government school have an internet connection. With the digital revolution beginning, it is likely that rural school will miss riding the digital wave due to insufficient infrastructure. So some of the policies that we can use to improve the infrastructure are: first, we can revamp old schools, revamping old schools to ensure that there are sufficient classroom, toilets, ramps for the differently able students, and labs should be the key focus. Smart classroom, creating smart classrooms by digitalizing the existing ones is another task that needs governmental efforts. Private partnership, government must partner with the private sector to improve Indian school infrastructure. It is important that every area of the country should have access to electricities. Efforts must be made through other means like solar energy to provide electricity in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Yes. So now moving forward, we will hear it from Adrita. Adrita is going to be talking about differences in funding among states and their problems and solutions for the same. So yes, Adrita.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So like India's public expenditure on education as a percentage of GDP, it has like gradually increased over time. But if we like compare it on the basis of different states, then there has been quite decline in certain aspects, like among the general category states, which includes mostly the North Indian states. There are differences in budget allocation for the education, like in Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu, the school education budget as a proportion of the GSDP, it has declined. And while in the special category states, the budgetary expenditure on school education as a percentage of their GSDP has shown an increase. Like this might be due to the population that like the North Indian states have a great, or they have a like greater population than the northeastern states. But there are also certain trends even amongst northeastern states, like they're spending more on their education, like Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Tripura, Assam, because like because the facilities that the government provides, they feel that they might not receive it if they do not allocate it properly. There's a sense of like not being in total in there's a sense that they are not being totally included into the overall country's education sector if they do not allocate their budget properly. And then there are other indicators like the per child spending and the per student spending, which varies across states. However, in all the 30 states of India, the per student spending is higher than the per child spending. No doubt, like the Navodaya Vidyalayas and the Kendriya Vidyalayas, they spend a lot in the expenditure of education models for the students. But based on the NEP 2020 initiatives, the Samagra Siksha scheme, it identified like some key areas of interventions for all-round development, holistic development of children's education from the early stage. Like they have mentioned this, like the training on social, psychosocial aspect, and then cyber safety to students, identification of hotspot in learning, and several teaching tools, online classrooms, and then creating outcome-based assessment of by teachers for learning. This all has to be included, and proper access to libraries and everything. I have seen that in my college also. Like there's this thing that the library remains closed for a long time, and then students, they do not get access to the books they actually need for their course. The librarians go on strike. This is all because they're not paid properly. So these are some things that are need to be catered to. Now talking about like the along with teacher training, supervision, and digital infrastructure, like we there's this problem that education is underfunded. It's true, but then it could be because of several reasons, like delayed payments to the states by the central government, and as well as that the conditional allocation by the state towards several items that schools do not need to spend on every year. On those items the school spends it, so the budget, it falls short for main expenditure. And at the same time, there are certain initiatives, as most of the people have talked about the Rajasthan government. The Rajasthan government, under its scheme, the Shikshak Ka Apna Vidyalaya and Gyanodaya projects, they have tried to get into the school educational system the public-private partnerships. Like through Gyanodaya scheme, charitable and private institutions were allowed to establish senior secondary and secondary schools at the panchayat headquarters with the help of government. So I guess I feel that this kind of initiative should be taken at the central and state levels both equally, and there has to be an inclusivity at both the general category states and the special category states. Only then we can expect that some sort of outcome comes out of the budget allocation for education.
All right. Thank you so much, Arjita. Now, moving forward, we will hear it from Srishti. Srishti is going to be talking about the condition of government schools in Delhi, especially. So, yes, Srishti?
Yeah, so am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll be talking about Delhi because since when Aam Aadmi Party has come into position, they've always promised to, improvise the situation of government schools in India. But I didn't really find like whatever I wrote and read about this. I couldn't find any, improvisations on behalf of the government. So I'll be talking about the same. So I read that basically in Delhi, uh, despite that it was stating that despite people having money, they were not recruiting the principals, they were not opening new government schools, and there was no payment of timely salaries to the teachers and the other employees in the school. So basically, it stated that that 80% of the government school in Delhi, their condition was worse than a junkyard, and it was like uh, they stated that since 2050, the enrollment statistics in Delhi government school has been on a decline. Even after 7 years of coming to power, the government couldn't fulfill its election promise that there will be more model schools and there will be good education infrastructure facilities in government. This was not at all fulfilled, and there has been no new school principals appointed. So all this was mentioned. Then it was said that the promise to about open 500 new government school. This was a promise that it was made around 7 to 8 years back, but this has not been fulfilled, and only about 63 to 70 schools are opened in Delhi, which are just open. Their facilities, their maintenance has not been taken care of. Then they have talking about that the education department's website also revealed that there have been no new schools in Delhi as promised. Yeah, then they have been talking that quality is a bigger concern in schools run by the Delhi government because as usual they were claiming that they have given the best education and all that stuff, but in consultation with other state governments, especially I read that Kerala government have been given a special status in all these areas. They have done improvement in their stage much better than any other state. So it was taken as a comparison, and and a survey was conducted, which was show that only around 60 to 70 government schools perform well, and the other around there are so many schools they were not even in the survey section, and it performed really bad. Then they have also talked about that uh, yeah, so they have talked also that not any single teacher was appointed, and even if they were appointment, they were not given the curriculum well. They were not given the task to be performed. The children were not only attending the school, the facilities were worse, and then there were many infrastructure issues regarding, there were no blackboards, there was no proper drinking water, sanitary facilities, and the school environment. A survey which was conducted, which stated that they asked the students of Delhi only, the government schools, that how do you find the school environment? They were like, the school environment is so suffocating that the students were dissuaded from attending the classes, which was the another reason that the dropout rate was also high in Delhi. And almost half of the government schools in country as well as in Delhi, they are not having electricity or proper playgrounds, to carry out the curriculum activities. And there is very slow progress in building the classrooms. There were no labs, there were no libraries, so that they can strengthen the government higher secondary school systems. And I would just like to say that then there was a budgetary and expenditure issues regarding all this. That if we look at the statistics, it was a promise was made that uh, we'll spend around 82 crores on government schools, but only 59 crores was allocated, and that allocated score was also not so performing well. It was just spent on just building a particular building, but it was not, properly useful for the children and also the teachers. So this was all, and yeah, so this was the situation of Delhi schools, which I read, which is highly concerning. That's it.
All right, moving forward, we will hear it from Anushka. Lastly, Anushka is going to be talking about infrastructure related issues in government schools and their potential solutions. So, yes, Anushka, please go ahead.
Okay, so here regarding infrastructure, we are talking about smart classes, digital libraries. But the thing is that the condition is so worse that there are a number of government schools in rural areas where they don't even have a building. And if they have a building, it is in a very dilapidated condition. And they lack blackboards, they lack benches, they have to study on floors. So when we are talking about infrastructure, we need to start from scratch. The first thing is that. And regarding the government schools, the data tells that an overwhelming number of students are enrolled in government schools. Initially, there was a decline in the number of students who were getting enrolled in government schools, and this data is provided by Annual Status of Education Report 2018. And after 4 years, after a brief break because of COVID-19, when the report was again released on 2022, it showed that there was an increase in the number of students enrolled in the government schools. And that was, of course, because of many people, they went out of their jobs and government schools provide education at a cheaper rate. So many students shifted to government schools after COVID. So when an overwhelming number of students are enrolled in government schools, so the thing is that it should be given exclusive focus. And the condition is that many schools lack benches, buildings, and playgrounds, such basic facilities. So how we are going to expect that the students whom we consider our future will pay off in the future time? So the next thing that I would like to talk about is that schools also lack washrooms, and this acts as an added disadvantage for girls because and this has resulted in increased dropout rates for girls in schools. So regarding proposed solutions, what we can do is that first of all, I would like to bring the focus on the Kothari Commission report that was released in 1960s. Way back in 1960s, it recommended a budgetary allocation that is 6% of GDP on education, and we have moved to 2023, and this recommendation of the commission is yet to be fulfilled. Last year, budgetary allocation for education was 2.9% of the GDP. That was the figure for last financial year. And for the current financial year, the percentage allocated has increased, but it is still far away from 6%. So first thing is that we need to focus on increasing spending on the education sector. And the next thing is that we need to start from the scratch. First of all, we need to map government schools and we need to identify their specific infrastructural facilities that they lack. And mapping should be done at the rural areas and at districts at very basic level. And then after identifying, we need to proceed and recommend the facilities that are to be provided accordingly, and budgetary allocation also need to be made district specific accordingly, because an overall structure, we don't know in an overall structure what is being spent where. So it should be started from the scratch, I would say. That's all.
All right, thank you so much, Anushka, for bringing in some important points. Moving forward, I think we've heard it from almost everybody. So Marina, if you have something to add in, you can.
There were certain points that I'd like to add, but in the end, everyone has covered everything I feel. So that is that. Thanks a lot for asking.
Yeah, all right. And yeah, like we have something written from Kartikeya, since Kartikeya was not able to speaking due to some issues at his end. So yeah, like as Kartikeya has written, you must have all read his message that before speaking about other things, for example, talking about teachers and other things, we have to look at basic necessities. For example, washroom is one of the primary necessity that has to be there, that has to be considered in government schools, because there is a lack of any separate washroom for female students, and even if there is a washroom, that is most probably not very functional, like there is sanitation problem around. So like we have to start from very basic things rather than talking about other things. So yes, this was it from Kartikeya's side, and if anybody has anything to add in, so please you are most welcome to add in. I guess not. So yeah, thank you so much everybody for